have the honor of introducing our next speaker. It's Dr. Sergio Canavate, and he's speaking on the P1 development practicalities, understanding one of the main components of sow lifetime productivity. So Dr. Canavate obtained his veterinary degree in Spain and developed his career focused on supporting gilt development and sow herd performance with many producers across the globe. Since 2010, he has been part of the PIC technical team and is currently leading the PIC applied female reproduction team. So with that, thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you, Jennifer. A pleasure to be here, and thank you for your invitation. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me well? Perfect, good. Yeah, good afternoon. Hopefully you are not too much sleepy, huh? And you guys are able to understand my Spanish accent. So we continue with robustness, right? And we continue with parity one development. Last week I was talking with a colleague, a producer, that says, Sergio, why you are talking about parity one development when my parity one performance is better than ever, right? My gills are efficiently growing faster. They are having an early age of puberty. They are having a better fertility rate. Litter size is better than ever. And they are able to win 13.5 plus pig, right? And 30–40% of those pigs, of those gills, they are winning more than 14 pigs, right? And that is true. That is something that made me think that whatever is happening in the last 10 years, even in the last 5, it was a good improvement, right? We were able to capture those opportunities, right? And those are and the gills and parity ones, they are one of the most prolific females nowadays in the sow farm, and they can compete with parity 3 sows, right? But obviously we are here because we still have some opportunities to capture, right? So many of those areas we already talk about that, but perhaps the question is what we talk about or why I'm talking about parity 1 development instead of gilt development, right? The facts are we already talked about that, right? So retention is a complex trait, right? It's something that is gonna take 15 months, right? At least to parity 2, influenced by genetics, environmental, nutrition. Mortality is one of the problems, right? But we cannot forget about the reproduction removals or removals in general, right? That is another 70% of the total animal being removed, especially on younger age, right? Parity 1 and parity 2 are the population that they are suffering the most. The majority of those losses, as we know, on reproduction, we talk about that, reproduction removals, right? No heat, no conceive. Those are the biggest opportunities. Mostly my presentation is based on understanding those drivers, right? So what can be done at the farm level to understand how I can influence that parity 2 retention, right? And obviously, isolated management tactics without a generic programming in place, consistent and well implemented, is difficult to succeed in the long run, right? So just to show you with you guys a couple of things I think will be interesting, right? One of the things is the reproductive success CBB that is already in place, right? All information coming from the GNX maternal program where we are capturing removal reasons, their reasons are being placed into our selection program. So we are trying to select animals that they will have a better chance to get up to parity 2, right? The other is the digital feed and leg structure. All animals being on the GNs, they have been those 10,000 videos already captured, and it's something that is part of the selection process where those images are being related to the retention of those animals, right? So we are able to have a heritability more precise, right, than in the past, right? So we need to have the genetic program should support any management strategy that we try to implement at the farm level. Jennifer already shared that information, right, coming from the article on PigChamp. So one of the things in the first graph is if we know that the majority of the biggest proportion of the animals being lost, it happened between parity 1 and parity 2, while we're still talking about retention up to parity 3, while we don't talk about retention up to parity 2, right? Because it looks like that this is the big wall that we need to tear down, right? This is the battle that we need to fight, right? And then, obviously, reproduction reasons, right? When I hear reproduction reasons, a couple of things come to my mind. We measure it, and if we measure it, it's something that we can influence. We just need to understand how we can influence the causes of those reproduction reasons, right? But as we see in many databases, right, between parity 1 and parity 2, 70% is due to calling, 30% is due to mortality, right? I spend time to understand this because at the end of the day, I think it's something that is matching the conversation that we were talking about. Here in the square, we have a GDU flow, a typical flow, right? And then here in the line, we have the south farm flow, right? Here we have the king, the breeding target, right? Since the gill entered into that GDU flow, many things could happen, right? That is going to have a positive or negative influence in that gill growth and development. Could be the facilities, the flow, the health plan, individual care of those animals, the reproduction management, or even the HNS flow, right? That is going to determine the number of gills that they are going to be eligible to be bred, to hit those targets, and to eliminate and make voluntary culling practices, right, like we were talking about, and it's going to drive our breeding decisions, right? If I have to pick two critical points in this process, I will say selection intensity, which is the quantity and the quality of the gills that they are available to select from, and gill eligibility criteria for insemination. They are the two things that they are critical in this process, because with understanding, controlling, and having the KPIs for those two, we will be able to at least diagnose is whatever is going to happen next is going to be positive or negative in terms of parity to retention, right? Obviously, the better quality is the pool of gill to select from, the better will be the developmental quality, the better will be the quality of the female bred as a parity 0, the parity 1 ferro, and the parity 2 retention. Everything is interconnected. Many times we do see farms that even having GDUs being attached to the farm, there is a huge disconnection here, right? There is a huge disconnection. And we need to understand in which part of this process is being disconnected, right? So this is something that they believe that's why it's so complex in many cases to get something implemented and to see the results at the end. If we look at parity 2 retention in a parity 1 development scope, right? I think that the goal is to build a sustainable parity 1 development program, right? We need to start from the beginning. We know that the losses happen here since that gill became a parity 1 and ferro, but there is a lot of animals in here, right, that they are not farrowing for second time, right? We could analyze the reasons. We need to understand the causes of that, right? Unfortunately, not many of those reasons or causes could be fixed here, and we need to start from the beginning. There are so many information in the literature that say that everything starts with the gill birth, right? The birth weight, colostrum intake, and we can talk about weaning quality, right? So there is a process that is, that retention starts at that point, right? Through that timeline, right, I think that there are 3 critical points that we can influence. Or at least we need to have something in place to control or to understand better. It's going to be the selection, it's going to be the first insemination, and it's going to be the quality of the animal at parity 1, right? Parity 1 farrowing. And there are 3 big buckets, right, that we can call it strategies. That is something that, depending on the opportunity that that particular flow have, perhaps is something that we can influence. When we talk about selection, it's selection intensity. Let's go to work on how big is that pool of gills to select from and what is the quality. Not many times we can influence both, right? Because the species that we have, it is what it is, right? But at least to optimize the number of gills available, and if we cannot increase the number, at least increase the quality of the gills available to select from. When we move to the gill eligibility criteria first insemination, the tendency is that the gills are growing more efficiently, nowadays compared with the past, right? So the gill eligibility criteria is still current today. We just need to adjust management practices at the sub-farm level to make sure that we are breeding gills in the right window of weight, age, and with the right number of HNS. And that is basically why we talk about parity one development, because we knew that just working in those two areas is good, but perhaps it's not enough, right? We need to start focusing on parity one preparation for the first lactation, right? So there are management practices that we can put in place in order to complement everything that is being done from birth to the first insemination. So selection intensity, right? In many cases, as a reproduction expert, we focus too much in puberty management, right? So the problem, because those gills are not cycling, is the board exposure. The problem is people that they are not putting the board inside the pen, and they are making fence line board exposure. Maybe we don't have enough board. Maybe we have so many things that they are not working here, but in some point we need to start thinking about what is the quality of female that I'm doing the heat checking, right? Is the right female? That female have a good growth rate, a good development? Because both, right, they're going to impact the selection intensity in quantity and quality, right? So the first thing that we need to look at is we need to make sure that the vital needs are being satisfied from entry to selection. This is the first key area that we need to start looking at. So when we go to start looking at this, right, maybe people could say, okay, why you are looking at that, right? This is the flow that they have. This is the species that they have. This is the flow that they have. And I have been entering 300 gills in the last 5 years, right? And that is right. But there are things that maybe we need to evaluate to understand if there is an opportunity in that particular GDU, in that particular flow. First is to understand that we have fallouts, and when those fallouts are happening, what is the reason of mortality, right? Because any female that die before selection, we are dropping our selection intensity. It's an animal less that will be a candidate to be selected, right? So the information keeping is important in this area. The second is going to be the GDU placement plan, right? So understanding limitations. Maybe we cannot change flooring space because we are not going to build a different GDU, but can we change the feeder space? Is there anything that I can make those gills make their environment less competitive, right? Can we do something in terms of feed formulation? We need to review which are the limitations and bottleneck in order to be closer to satisfy those vital needs, right? And of course, housing and environmental conditions, right? The last area will be GDU farm flow. I think that this side is one of the main forgotten because, yeah, we have animal being cycling. Those animals, where does HNS go, right? Do we have a specific place for those gills that they already cycle to be placed before the first insemination? Are we having farrowing rate challenges, overbreeding, and I don't have a space to put my cool sows, so I'm utilizing just one pen of gills, right, in my GDU to place my cool sows, right? So it's one pen less. For a group of 300, and maybe we need to place them in 4 pens, right, or in 5 pens instead of 6, right? We are compromising, right, in that way, all housing and environmental conditions, right? So it's just assess where we are, right, before we go to the reproduction area, right? It's important to double check. If we go about selection intensity, right, many people believe, right, that say people, they don't know how to select good gills. And I'm 100% in disagreement with that, right? They are with pigs every day. Maybe they don't, some people, they don't have the skills, the language, the vocabulary to say this is 1 or 2 or 4, but they know how a good pig looks like. Many times the problem is that they don't have enough gills to select from, right? And they need to take whatever they have, right? In many cases, we see that the first step of selection, which is I'm going to remove from that pep the animal to be cool, right? Many times that selection process starts here, and depending on the number of the animal that I have to select from, this is the selection, right? Whatever left is animals being selected, right? But we know that this good selection process has two different steps. First, we need to identify those animals. And then from the leftover, we need to make sure that we are selecting animals for a longer lifetime performance. There are two steps, but again, everything starts with selection intensity. This is the key area that we need to at least thinking on and working on. It's not a matter to put more gills into the GDU. Whatever is my GDU capacity, optimize that number. So selection intensity, right? First, we need to have the right number of gills to select from, right? And then the PIC leg score is something that we were doing for decades, right? And it works, right? And there is a correlation between good legs and bad legs in terms of longevity, right? Then we have new technologies, as I said before, it's something that is going to go to commercial sooner than later, right? But again, we need to have the right size of pool of gills to select from, right? Because if not, we will end up selecting pools even when we have the right technology in order to select for leg structure and longevity, right? So for selection intensity here, right? Keyword, gill pool size management, right? We need to understand what is that number, right? And it's going to be related for each GDU, for each flow, right? And we need to anticipate any situation. If we have high mortality for any reason, right? We know that the number of gills that we are going to select in that group or will be lower or will be the same, but the quality is going to be lower, right? Because at the end of the day, the fund, they wanted to hit the number of gills selected as a KPI, right? Once we get the pool side, proper selection, we can teach people how to select animals to have a longer lifetime performance, right? Selection standards, right? Poor feet and leg structure, right? Is something that we need to emphasize, the same as poor growth, right? Selecting animals with poor legs and poor growth, we are not going to fix parity to retention. Those animals are high contributors to be fall out, right? To be removed from the herd. Selection KPIs, what is my selection rate, right? What is my gill utilization rate, right? How many gills I'm able to breed out of the group selected, right? Those KPIs are critical and need to be related with every group of gills that enter to the farm, right? Without those KPIs or controlling those KPIs, it's going to be difficult to understand how my GDU people is working, if they are having some stress to get the right female being selected and being bred, right? And then it's something that happens, right? Yes, we can select full value gills, the ones that we know that they are the right ones, right? That they accomplish all eligibility criteria. But there are weeks or there are months that we are going to be selecting animals that they are not full value gills, right? They are second select or whatever name you are going to put there. There are some data experiences that shows that when systems are openly, right, internally, recording the number of full value gills based on the criteria and the number of second select based on the criteria selected, right? Between 30–50% of the second select, they don't get bred, right? And then those animals are really having problems to achieve parity too. So sometimes if this situation is going to happen while we are not recording it internally, right? At least the expectation is going to be there, and at least we will be able to understand how this group performs compared with the ones that the people did the selection in a right way. But they didn't have enough big pool to select from, right? So they were doing the right selection, right? If we go to gill eligibility criteria, again, the criteria is still valid, right? And it's something that obviously we need to review, right? What is the age at puberty? What is the weight at first insemination, right? What is the age, right? And if we are breeding animals at first estrus, second estrus. But what happens if we are in a high growth rate scenario, right? If the gills nowadays are growing faster than in the past, maybe they are 210 days, they will be, or they tend to be overweight if I'm not able to breed them earlier, right? It's something that we need to consider, right? We were focusing in the past on light gills that they were not able to get 135 kgs or 300 pounds at a certain age, right? But right now, I think that the needle also is pointing out gills bred heavy, right? It's something that we need to put our attention in the future. If we look at here, we have two graphs here, right? This graph is the improvement on growth rate from 2014 to 2022 on terminal lines, right? We see a difference of 68 grams per day, right? On terminal lines, right? Look at the maternal lines, similar change, right? Similar change. Gills nowadays, they are more efficient in terms of growth, right? And we are seeing that in healthy systems, in systems that they are raising gills with the proper stocking density, diet, health, etc., right? So this is kind of the scenario that we are start seeing today, and we are wanting to see more often in the future, right? So it's something that we need to be considered, because something has to be adjusted at the farm level, right? Think about that. Based on that improvement in growth, based on the genetic improvement, if we compare it to 110 days, the weight that we have, and then potentially the weight that we could have, from 144 kgs to 155, is going to be a 7.6% improvement, right? This is as an average, right? But if we calculate based on that average and that distribution, the percentage of heavy animal that we have with 144 is 11%. But if we start seeing weight average of 155, it's 36%, right? It's 2 times higher. It's something that we need to be thinking about, right? This modeling was already, let's say, from data from the field, from customers that they were waiting gills, right? It was really close to this number, right? It's close to this number. So this is something that is happening, right? So if we want to avoid to breed gills in the heavy side, right? Obviously, there is something that we need to start considering as a key area: puber induction, right? Puber induction. That's the key, right? The quality of the puber induction and at what age I'm going to start the puber induction, right? Because obviously we want to breed them in a second heat, right? But today just a second heat as a single KPI is not telling us much if that animal is overweight, right? So we need to make sure that the animals could be bred at the right window of weight, age, and the right heat, right? So something has to be done differently in those GDUs. Right? And I took that slide from Jennifer, right? Early responses to effective board stimuli is the critical selection tool, right? And I think that is key to handle the GDU. I think that was Gustavo who saw the blueprint of a GDU, right? And we know that the GDU, we need to typically they flow by age, right? So at that certain age, the next group needs to come. So whatever left, we are moving to the farm to be bred, regardless if they have an HNS or not, right? But what happens if we are able to get an HNS here, and we know the weight at the first HNS, right? When we know the weight at the first mating, it's too late. Breeders breed. They breed the animal and then they take, right? This is what they do. They're not going to take a breeding decision, right? We need to hit target, right? If they are lucky, they will be over 300 pounds or under 350, but they are not going to start thinking about they want to skip that hit, right? They are going to breed them. But if we are able to get the weight at first hit, we can take a decision, right? If this animal is 280 pounds, 125 kgs, she's going to be a candidate to be bred in the next cycle, right? Because she will be in the range of weight, right? If this animal is below that weight, it's an animal that I don't want to move to the breeding area. I want to keep in that pen, right? We can take or plan ahead breeding decisions if we have animal cycling before 195 to 100 days, right? Once the gills are cycling at 200 days, we don't have too much flexibility to take the right breeding decision for them. This is the information that we have related just for the age of first insemination and for the weight of first mating, right? Again, if we are breeding gills older, right, they have a lower retention up to parity 3. But then we need to start thinking about, in the past, older means that they were heavier, right? And we were associating to that because we just were analyzing one single trait, and that is age, right? But why, if the animals are older and 300 pounds, right? So maybe the problem is growth and development, right? It's something that also is going to be included here, right? So it's important to also associate the age with the other traits, right? To understand what is the implication to breed animal between 226 and 250, and we go and say you are breeding all females and they are heavy, and say no, the gill looks great, right? They are fantastic, right? Maybe we have an opportunity to improve their growth and development. Something similar could happen here, right? With the weight of first insemination, right? So they are heavy, right? But we could have animals that they are heavy with no heat, which is something that they are the worst combination, the worst scenario. But they could be heavy, they could have one heat, and they could be young, right? Or not too old in the right window of weight. Maybe those animals can be bred a little bit earlier and place them in the right windows of weight, age, and number of heat, right? So it's good to have those traits. It's good to control the age and the weight, but it's not telling us 100% of the story of the thing that could happen in the GDO. And this is a trial done by our colleagues in Agroceres PIC in Brazil that was presented in the IPBS the last year, where all those gills, they were raised in the same farm, the same feed, in the same environmental and feeding conditions. So we have gills that they grow less than 650 grams, other between 650 and 750, and gills that they were growing over 750, right? Because maybe we could say, maybe if I'm breeding those gills that they are high efficient growth female, if I'm breeding a little bit earlier, what will be the impact in lifetime performance, right? So they were bred earlier than obviously the other two groups, right? Their litter size at 2 parity 3 was bigger, and at least in that study, the impact in terms of retention wasn't significant. So there wasn't a negative impact of those animals to get them bred earlier. So it's possible to start considering that as an option, right? And this is something I think is really interesting. We surveyed some farms, individual farms here in the US Midwest, with tape, flank-to-flank tape, when we were visiting. So this is not telling the industry a situation, it's telling you what happened in this farm in that particular week when we were visiting them, right? So here we have the weight in pounds. The red line is the upper limit, right? 350 pounds. And you can see how many gills were bred over that, right? Good system, good farms, right? Nothing wrong with them. But when we took that information from the gills bred that week or the previous week, we realized that those animals were bred over 350 pounds, right? It's something that really opened our eyes and say, it's something that we need to understand better, right? Because based on the modeling that our nutrition team did, obviously a heavy gill will be a heavy sow, and the sow hair will be heavier, right? And we know that there are some bad, not good consequences related with heavy herds, right? First is going to be the cost, right, of feeding costs, right, the cost of production. And the other thing is going to be consequence in terms of performance, right? So just to sharing with you that here we have the opposite problem, right, lightweight, right? But we start seeing gills bred over 350 pounds as it's been a reality. So when we talk about gill eligibility, right, as I say, let's focus on puberty onset, right? It's something that we were focusing for years on HNS. Let them cycle, let them cycle, let them capture that heat, right? Let them focus on puberty induction, right? Let's try to get the puberty induction to no later than 24 weeks of age. We will have a little bit of more room, right, to take the right breeding decision for that female, right? And Jennifer said, early responder to effective boar exposure is the critical tool selection, right? We can utilize that information of weight at first hit as a tool, right, to take the right breeding decision or a better breeding decision for them, right? HNS, right? We always say quality of boar exposure. Let's go to allocate more time, resources, boar power. Yeah, but you know, if I'm asking to a company to, hey, you gotta put one extra person, you gotta put more board because you gotta do the job in that way, is that is gonna to pay off, right? Where is the revenue of that, right? Some information says that if we are able to breed gills in the right quadrant, there is a revenue of those gills bred in that quadrant compared with the ones that they are bred outside that quadrant, right? So we could impact the economical profitability, even though putting a little bit more time, resources into the GDU, right? If we are able to allocate those gills within that quadrant. And then, as was presented early in the morning, right? We need to have reproduction KPI. We need to control that process, right? We need to understand, because it's a long process, right? It's 15 months, right? Up to parity 2. If we don't have KPIs controlling every single step of that process to see if the process is under expectation, over expectation, or just meeting the expectation, we are going to get lost, right? Yield utilization rate, the HNS and the weight at the first hit is something that perhaps we need to consider, if not recording in a database, at least to handle it in the farm level. And why not, right? The percentage of gill bred over 350 pounds, at the end of the day, right? If we need to record a weight, those one are gonna be the thermometer, right? If the puberty induction HNS flow is making my farm to breed gills over 350 pounds or not, right? So it's something that we need to be focused on, right? Typically, we just look at average. The gill average weight is this, right? Maybe we need to start, from now on, start looking at that percentage of gill bred over 350 pounds. Now we go to parity 1 preparation, right? This is, so up to now, is something that we were doing for decades, we were promoting for decades with a little bit twist, right, about the approach, about the focus, but I think that this is what could make the difference, right? So this is the visual representation coming up from 2 different data sets or trials, one in US and one in Europe, where here we have the lactation feed intake per day, right, and here we have the caliper score at farrowing entry, right? The highest is the caliper score, the lower is the tendencies, the lower is the lactation feed intake average, right? Heavy female is less lactation. It's something that we know. It's something that was already documented, right? So lactation feed intake, right? And this is linking with the past, right? So we were talking about heavy gills, right? We were talking about, it's something that we can fix here when they enter into the farrowing room. It's too late. We just can document how many of those animals are going to enter, or parity ones are going to enter on my farrowing route heavy, right? But I cannot fix it at that moment. I need to take care of that, right? So it's important to be considered. If we just look at this graph, which is everything, and then we split the sows and the gills, right? In the gill, we have the same trend, the same tendency. The gills already eat less than a sow, right? 10%, 15% less, right? But if they are heavy at farrowing entry, they are eating even less, right? And we are asking them to win 13.5 plus pig, right? To get the recovery from the farrowing process, right? I don't think that they are going to make it, right? It's something that we need to keep into consideration, right? It's another factor on top of all the challenges that those gills are going to face during the first lactation. And here is another graph talking about something similar, right? So here we have the caliper changes, the caliper lost, right, from farrowing entry to weaning, right? So, and here we have the caliper score, right? The higher is the caliper score, the higher is the number of caliper points lost during the lactation period, right? The heavier they are, the more body condition in terms of caliper point they're gonna lose. They're gonna lose, right? So maybe she's gonna be weaning a normal condition, right? But it has some consequence, right? It's something that we need to consider too. In this table is just the representation of the risk to be removed for reproduction reasons, taking as a reference the animal that didn't lose any caliper point or even gain, compared with the ones that they lost 1 or 2 units, 3, 4, or 5 or more, right? You see, the risk of those animals to be removed, the higher is the body condition in terms of caliper point loss in the lactation, the higher will be the risk of those animals being removed from reproduction reasons. So it's something that is linked with things that we were talking this morning, right? We just need to start utilizing the data to understand what's going on, right? Or what we can do, right? This is another trial done in Spain, in a customer in Spain, where it's telling similar things, right? So in here we have the caliper ranges, less than 12, 12, 15, and more than 15. Here we have the percentage of that population. And then we have the red columns are animals that they were losing up to 3 points, right, of caliper points in the lactation, and the animal being lost more than 3, right? If the animal entered in the normal condition between 12 and 15, the retention rate to parity 3 are equivalent regardless, right, the caliper point loss. But look what happened when the animal entered with more than 15 caliper points, right? The situation is not as good for the heavy ones, but if they are losing more than 3 caliper points, the situation is even worse, right? So heavy animals going into farrowing room, they don't last long, right? And this is the similar graph, but just with the number of wing peaks, right? There is a huge difference between the number of wing peaks up to parity 3, right? With that, we can think, okay, if Sergio told me that the heavy animals going into farrowing room, specifically if they are gills, right? If I need to get back to my GDU, right, and I need to get back maybe to other areas in this part of the farm, why am I not able to fix it during the first gestation, right? Everybody have the temptation to say, okay, from now on, I'm going to have 2 types of gills, the fat gills, and I'm going to have the normal gill. I'm going to feed the fat gills with less feed, and then I'm going to fix the problem. We do not recommend that, right? We do not recommend that. We don't want to characterize gills by body condition. They are growing, right? They grow. They are going to develop the mammary gland. They need to go through that milk production. We do not characterize gills as a fat, and we don't feed them less than their maintenance level, right? If that happens, if we measure that thermometer of farrowing entry and we realize that we have a higher percentage of heavy animals going into farrowing room, we need to go back to the GD1 and understand what happened with my gill flow, right? The thin animals, they are easier, right? Because at that moment we can make a plan to recover them, right? Or making sure if everything implemented in gestation is according to recover things out, right? But on gills, we do not recommend feeding gills under maintenance level, right? Regardless of the body condition. So we have that, right? And then we already, those animals, those parity ones are already in the farrowing room, right? Some of them will be heavier, some of them will be in normal conditions, some of them maybe they are in the light condition, right? We cannot underestimate the pre-farrowing management, right? We do recommend do not feed gills or any sows at farrowing entry. We should be feeding them with the same amount of feed fed in the previous, in the gestation, right? And we do recommend to split meals in 2 or 3 times a day, right? Because if the time from the last meal to farrow is over than, based on that famous research, more than 3 hours, stillborn rate goes up, right? So that time on managing those females, specifically on gills, and feeding them 2 or 3 times a day pre-farrow, right, and limiting the feed intake is well used. We need to make sure that they are not full fed, right? This is one of the things. The other thing is voluntary water intake, right? Are we worried about that? Are we looking at nipples? Are we worried about if the gills going into farrowing room, they know where to drink, right? When they start drinking, right? This is fundamental. And look at here, right? 24 hours before farrow, right? We are talking about, in that research, almost 25, right, liters, right? And animals being very active, right? We need to prepare those animals for the parturition. It's gonna be a long process, right? If we have animals being full fed or with more than 6, 7, 8 hours right between feeding, right? Or they got constipating with a poor water intake, they are not gonna make it, right? As simple as it, right? And this is a good one, right? It's a little bit complex. I'm gonna try to do my best. I'm not Guillermo Ramis to explain that, but I'm gonna to do my best, right? So based on some data set that I was looking at lately, we found maybe this is gonna be higher, but because he's 2 years old, 33% of the sows, their farrowing lasts more than 5 hours, right? More than 5 hours delivering pigs, right? And we need to be thinking that it's a gill, right? She's still growing, she needs to develop the mammary glands, she needs to start producing milk, right? Plus 5 hours, right, of farrowing duration, right? It's a huge stress. And then we want them to get recovered and get back to eat and drink as normal, right? And then raise up 16 pigs that we put on them to win 15 pigs, right? It's a huge stress. Think about those animals being fat, right? Overweight or underweight, right? How that is gonna be, right? It's gonna be really challenging for them. The same happened here with the mammary metabolism, right? Guillermo saying in many of his presentation, we need 800 of blood to produce 1 kilo of milk. They have their cardiovascular system need to be in a perfect shape with really good ventilation, with really good hydration, because they are gonna do it, right? So that management is critical to produce 10, 12 kgs of milk, right? Data say that we need, or they need 2 kgs of glucose per day to produce that milk production per day. If they don't get that from the feed, right? They're gonna get it from their body reserves, right? So we cannot underestimate when the negative impact of feed sows 24 hours after farrowing, 48 hours after farrowing, because those animals are in trouble, right? And we need to understand what's going on with them as soon as possible, right? We rely on people, we rely on protocols, right? But also we rely on peripartum care, right? We rely on body condition management, right? So it's something that we cannot fix that mess with management at farrowing entry, right? We can mitigate the impact, but it's something that has to be done before. And how that is going to impact the number of removal due to reproduction reason. It has something to do with reproduction reason, right? Because we have lower feed intake, that female is not recovering well, and she starts mobilizing off the fat reserve that she have. Maybe when it's not enough, by day 7, day 10, we start seeing them losing muscle, and then we have more ketone bodies in their blood, and then we have the insulin level goes up and down, and then they are reducing the appetite. They are in a spiral, right? They're in a vicious cycle. That can be prevented, right? And that has something to do with the reproduction removals, right? But again, it's not something that we can mitigate the impact with management at farrowing entry, but it's something that we need to open the mind and see that perhaps it's something that has something to do with the GDU management too. Look, just to be consistent, right? So if we see here this graph, Antonio Vela passed me that information. So It's kind of the animal that they have a consistent and higher consistent feed intake, they have a really good subsequent reproductive performance. Look at that animal that we are talking about, right? Those animals that they are not starting feeling well, they don't recover well, they have some erratic feed intake, they have been treated, right? They are not going to make it. That animal is going to have to be removed, right? Due to some reproduction reasons, right? Whatever that reason might be, right? But we can be focused in the process. The process says that we need to prepare the room, that we need to be focused on parity 1, right? That we need to check daily water intake, check for problematic sow. If a sow is not eating or drinking, why we don't take that sow out and we make that sow walk, right? Maybe she's going to urinate, maybe she's going to defecate, and maybe she's going to feel better, right? Because looking at gills in that position in farrowing room is not a good sign, right? So when we talk about parity 1 preparation for first farrowing, right? Gestation feeding program, look here. Parity 1 feeding program, start with body weight at first mating, right? Everything starts there, right? Because we say we cannot fix fat gills or heavy gills. They are not fat gills, they are heavy gills at farrowing. We need to go to the body weight at first mating, right? Then we can check body condition at farrowing. This is another thermometer, right? We already have the animals being placed on crates, right? If we want to know where we are, well, we don't take the caliper and measure parity 1s, right? Just to see what is the picture that we have today, right? And see if we need to adjust something related with the body weight at first insemination, right? And then body condition at weaning, right? It's not just the body condition at weaning, it's the body condition loss or caliper point loss during lactation, right? So it's a little bit different, right? Well, all my sows, they look great at weaning, but maybe we are having a challenge because they are losing more than 3 or 4 points, right? And that's why we are seeing more reproduction issues, right? Never feed gills below maintenance level recommended in our case and our genetic by our nutrition team. Feeding preferral, right? We need to spend time here, right? Preparing a sow to go to the parturition is as important as monitoring piglets, being alive or not. She has to deliver the pigs, right? And she's going to be the one who is milking those pigs and raise those pigs. We cannot do that for them, right? Do not full feed gills preferral and so on stimulate water intake preferral. Key, hydration preferral, right? 5 hours, right? Or farrowing duration. Those animals need to be hydrated. 800 liters to produce 1 kg of milk. They has to be hydrated, right? The hydration need to be there, right? And then individual sow care, early intervention plan. We need to have a plan in farrowing rooms, right? Early diagnosis, right? Early intervention. And in many cases is why we don't use more KPIs or parity 1 KPIs, right? Could be win to service interval, right? That could be one KPI, right? It's something that we can understand how is the population of how my parity 1s are performing in my farrowing room. The other could be what is the percentage of my parity 1s being early win, right? That could be another KPI that we can track. There are many, right? We just need to be creative, right? But there are many things that longer win to service interval parity 1, maybe we can fix if we go back to the GDU, right? It's not going to be the board exposure during the win to service interval, and might not be the feed management during the win to service interval. Maybe the root cause is something that needs to be found in our GDU, right? So last slide, just coming back to the beginning, right? So we have the same 6 messages here, but look, expand the view from the traditional gill development focus to a sustainable parity 1 development, right? So we were talking about selection intensity as a concept, right? It's something that we need to be working on. Every farm, every system, they have their own GDU design, they have their own limitation. We just need to maximize that. We don't live in a perfect world, right? But we can make that world a little bit more perfect, right? Gill eligibility, right? At first insemination, right? We were focusing for years on low growth females being bred under 100 pounds, right? And still we have to be focused on that. But also from now on in the future, we need to be thinking on animals or gills being bred because of the improvement on growth, right, and early puberty, right? And parity one preparation, right? It's not the solution to the problem, but I do believe that is a perfect addition to the traditional gill management program. Not because we are going to fix the problem, it's because we are going to take measurements here that maybe is going to make us think or work or diagnose opportunities in here. So with that, that's all that I have for you guys, and more than happy to take as many questions as you have.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Do we have any questions in the audience?
That's good, no?
Yeah. I have a question. When
Yep.
we're looking at the retention, or where the retention is lost between P1 and P2, it's about 15 to 17%, and the remainder of the parities are 10, 12%. Can we expect the loss between P1 to P2 to be down by 10, 12%, do you think? Or
That's a good question. And I think it is something that we need to take it system by system based on their limitation. For sure, if we are having 15, 20%, right, I think it's a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. But as a goal, as a target, why not, right? Yeah. Why not? We just need to, there are some key components here, right? So first is, for each system, if we understand that gills bred at the right, let's say, right quadrant, right? The right age, right weight, the right number of hits, right? Those are the ones who is going to lead the charge, right? Those are the ones that they are going to tell us where they are, if that level can be improved, and then what will be the next level, right? I do believe that we need to take it case by case, but why not? We are not going to take that challenge, right? When we are looking large system with 30, 50 farms, I'm pretty sure that we will have farms, right, in the top 25 that they will be close to that 10%, right? If that can be achievable, right, we can challenge the other farm to be closer to that, right?
Good, thank you.
Yeah. How many ounces, Fred? Yeah. Look, when we are looking at lactation feed intake, lactation water intake, right, is not a parameter that we usually control. It's not something that we have farms controlling it, right? But I will say that the literature is telling something around 10 gallons of water, a little bit less, right? That is something that could be as a goal, right? So it's something that we need to stick to that. But I will say if we cannot measure everything, we need to make sure that pre-furrow, right? Pre-furrowing is the most critical phase for water intake, right? But unfortunately, at least the best farm that I'm visiting, controlling water intake is by room, right? So sometimes it's tricky just to get that number even being controlled. But let's focus on water intake pre-furrow, right? It's something that if we make the calculation right, 25 liters, right, on 30 to make the calculation easy. If we have a regular nipple working properly, 2 liters per minute means that animal needs to be up drinking, or safe, but drinking for 15 minutes a day, right? We need to ask ourselves if they are really doing it, right?
Thanks very much, Sergio. Great talk. Short comment supporting one of your statements and one question. It seems there is something that is growing rapidly in Europe, in particular in Spain, which is these electronic feeding systems for lactation, because feeding P1 sows is more than art than science in many cases, and it seems that it does matter the total feed intake, right? But it seems that feed intake pattern matters a lot.
Yes.
So these ups and downs that you have mentioned are telling you a story. A story that could be related to MMA, to a reaction to a vaccination, or some other things. And it's pointing very nicely who is the sow to take care, which is 5 to 10%, no more than that, but it's of great help. So it's a new thing, but it's a new tool that is particularly useful in P1 sows, and it's the use is growing rapidly. My question. Regarding you have mentioned the Pixam study about which were the reasons for culling sows, etc. The second reason is lameness. And lameness, it seems that there's just one single reason for lameness. And lameness has more family names in terms of horizontal cracks, vertical cracks, white line problems, osteochondrosis has been mentioned. So what do you think about dealing with one of the major problems regarding P1 early culling sows, being, I wouldn't say blind, but with not a lot of detail to understand better what type of lameness is generating the main process? Are we skipping that? Should we pay more attention to understand better that part?
No, totally agree. The first comment that you made, Carlos, about the lactation feed intake with electronic feed, it is great. Something happened to that animal, right? So thank you for that comment. About the lame, so many kind of lameness, right? Even there are so many kind of hoof lesions, right? And if you walk pens, gestation pens, you can see them, and you can see those animals when they are up, right? So I always tell people that when animals are being on crate, like we have in US, it's tough to even when people believe that it's simple to identify the lameness, I think sometimes it's tough, right? Because we don't pay too much attention. When we have a stanchion and all animals need to walk and they are sit and they need to walk to get the feed, is when we are seeing all different kind of lameness. And people have less difficulties to identifying those poor competitors because of the lameness than when they are on crate, that they are just need to get up, right? And it's just 20, 25 minutes since that person was identifying and doing the chore when that animal start feeling a little bit uncomfortable because maybe she was laid down for 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, right? But in a competitive environment like a pen gestation, it's easier. We just need to have the people right there to identify them, right? But I totally agree, they are underestimated. Sometimes it's too late, right? And in your reality in Europe, it's true. When low competitors in group housing setting, right? That animal is going to be big, right? Really quick, right? They don't last too long in that pen, right? So you guys always are more proactive identifying those poor competitive animals and link it to some kind of lesion or lameness that we do here in North America. Yeah, thank you for your question.
All right. I think in the interest of time, thank you, Sergio.
Yep.
Join me in thanking Sergio once again for his talk.